I will now call to order the THPRD Board of Directors meeting for April 14th, 2020. Jessica, please take roll.
Felicita Monteblanco.
Here.
Tia Ping.
Here.
Wendy Kroger.
Here.
Heidi Edwards.
Here.
Ashley Hartmeyer-Prigg.
Here.
Thanks, everybody. We do have some action resulting from executive session. If someone would like to make a motion.
Yes, I'd like to move that the Board of Directors authorize staff to acquire a property in the southeast quadrant of the district for the purchase price discussed in executive session using system development charge funds, subject to the standard due diligence review and approval by the general manager.
Thank you, Heidi. Do we have a second?
I will second. This is Tia.
Thank you, Tia. Jessica.
Ashley Hartmeyer-Prigg.
Yes.
Wendy Kroger.
Yes.
Tia Ping.
Yes.
Heidi Edwards.
Yes.
Felicita Monteblanco.
Yes. Thank you, Jessica. We will move into audience time. It appears that we have one submission made to the district that will be read aloud by Tia. And Jessica will will keep time, being mindful of the fact that the 3-minute rule still applies. Tia, do you want to go ahead and read it?
Sure. So this was submitted April 14, 2020 on behalf of Reach Community Development. It says, thank you for the opportunity to submit public testimony digitally. Reach appreciates the THPRD's board's discussions and staff efforts around SDC waivers to support affordable housing. Reach recommends that the SDC waiver policy be defined broadly to allow for long-range flexibility while also making clear any immediate priorities. Reach recommends that 100% waivers be allowed in policy for all units 60 MFI and below. We also support prioritizing resources for homes reserved for 30 MFI and below households. For example, the board could award full waivers to 30% MFI units automatically and then allow case-by-case decisions on the waiver percentages and availability for 30 to 60 MFI housing. Reach also recommends avoiding any absolute requirement of public benefit since housing affordability is in itself a public benefit. However, we recognize that public benefits aligned with the open space and community uses could be a criteria used to determine the amount of waiver approved for specific projects. Thank you for your work on this important initiative, Dan Valliere, I think it's Valliere, Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Tia, very much for reading that. Thank you, Jessica, for keeping time. I know I want to be mindful of the fact that, I certainly appreciate that our affordable housing developers are reaching out to us today. Because this isn't on the agenda and because there's much to talk about regarding COVID and Metro natural resources, I'm positive this piece of feedback will probably be reviewed at an upcoming meeting when the SDC funds SDC potential waivers are being discussed. Any questions or concerns from my peers?
Nope.
With that, we will go right into committee liaison updates. I know that things have been really different. I certainly appreciate everyone's responsiveness, my peers on the board, and of course our staff, forever indebted for the work that you do. I know everyone wants to make sure that they share or gets to share. So we'll just go in random order. Tia, any committee liaison update or any updates? What you been working on?
I've been visiting our parks. They're amazing and beautiful and well maintained. I want to give a shout out to all of our staff who've made sure that our parks and trails are safe for everyone, are well maintained, are beautiful, and that we get the signage out to make sure that our community is aware of what's going on and keeping themselves safe also. I know everyone is working super hard, and I just want to take the time to really thank everybody and make sure that you guys hear that we see you, and we are just on this journey with you guys, and we're really feeling it for our staff, for our district, for our community members, everyone, and we just have everybody's thoughts in our head or in our hearts. As far as what else I've been doing is for the liaison stuff, because all the self-distancing and stuff, we haven't met with our advisory committees. I did reach out, and there was some interest of maybe potentially, depending on how much longer this shelter in place goes on, of having digital or virtual meetings also to keep a connection with our advisory boards and create a place where they can also share their ideas or be sounding boards off of each other to create ideas for what we can be doing or should be doing during this time. I think we were supposed to have a all advisory where I know there's some grants that we're trying to get out before June, I think, before the next budget cycle. So it would be interesting to see if we could do maybe a virtual check-in with everybody. And I think that would be super cool if we could make that happen, if staff has the capabilities and availabilities to do that. But other than that, everything is as good as it can be in this particular situation.
Thank you, Tia. Ashley?
Yes, thank you. I'll start with Felicia and I have been attending a call with other local elected officials. I think tomorrow will be our 4th or 5th week. And basically our main goal is to stay up to date with what's going on with COVID-19 and to advocate for THPRD whenever possible. We've had Representative Bonamici, we've had Senator Merkley, as well as Labor Commissioner Val Hoyle, and some state representatives and state senators. And so reminding them of how important THPRD is right now. I'm just sharing that to let you know that we are really trying to advocate as much as we can to make sure that we are kept in mind when any of the various relief efforts are being built. I would also like to say, let's see, so I've been on the trails on the weekend and they're very crowded, and I just saw Holly's video and I'm grateful for that about crowding. But if there's anything else we can do to help spread the word on like better distancing in our parks and trails, please do let us know. It's been fun to make videos. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you to staff. I'm so excited. The press release that just came out about our temporary shelter being open, in that new partnership, it's just something that is so meaningful to me, and I feel so grateful that our space is being used to serve our community during this time. It's such a scary time for so many people, and I just think every day how blessed I am to have a home, and so I feel just so grateful that staff made this partnership happen so that we could help house people temporarily. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Heidi?
Yes, just to echo what folks have been saying about our gratitude towards staff, we couldn't get through any of this without you. So thank you for your hard work and dedication. And to those who, are doing maintenance and park patrol and outdoors, taking care of the trails and the nature parks, very appreciative, and how quickly you were able to do signage and get the word out about closure of playgrounds, courts, etc. Nature and Trails, our advisory committee did not meet, but it's been really impressive. Doug shared with us a traffics report that Bruce had put together about trail use and just how it's peaking on Commonwealth, Fano Creek, and the West Side Regional Trail. And I think it just really it's a testament to the importance of people being outside and our mental health and well-being in nature right now. That's been a lot of folks in the community have commented on that. So thank you to those who are working outside and maintaining the parks and trails for us. Additionally, as a liaison to the foundation, I had an opportunity to chat with Eileen and Joff. Thank you, Eileen Kravitz and Joff Retch, for all of the hard work. And I think we're going to get to hear a little bit from Joff tonight about the work they're doing to continue our foundation pursuit with Access for All. And so they've been reaching out to donors. They've got their pulse on various foundation and opportunities that we might be able to tap into, and other things that are in the works that we're hoping to develop. But I'll leave that for Joff to speak to a little bit later. On top of that, just making contact with our legislative representatives locally, and I think it was maybe yesterday, Ashley and I were on a call with Congresswoman Bonamici, just making sure that they're aware that we're here and that we've got our pulse on what's taking place with COVID-19, as well as federal legislation that can benefit our employees in the district as a whole. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Wendy?
Hi, thank you. A couple of things. One is I wanted to share that the Parks and Facilities Advisory Committee has been very busy, even though we aren't meeting. I've reached out to each one of them individually, and I've chatted with all but one, and I'm still hounding that one. I know that I want to give a shout out to John Campbell and to Brenda Peterson. Also, they've reached out to the advisory committee. I gave them some homework. I asked if they, first of all, would put the Park Patrol phone number in their own phones so that whenever they saw anything that they thought was worth reporting, they would have a place to do it right then. Secondly, I asked if they would just let us know what they were seeing, if there was anything they thought we should do more about. And I asked them to think about in the future, when this is all finished, what other kinds of things they might come up with that we can do as a district. So they had a little homework. It's been kind of fun talking to them. And I really appreciate them being out there. I think it's critically important that we continue to involve and talk with our advisory committee members. They went through a fairly arduous process to become advisory committee members, and we take them seriously. And I think it's important that we continue to let them know that we really appreciate their efforts, especially when we can't just meet or talk in person. So that's number one. Secondly, I wanted to say that I've had the opportunity to work with Lori Baker and Keith Hobson on the pension committee. There's been lots of things going on there, which you will in due course, of course, hear. So, but I wanted to say that it's just such a pleasure to work with both Lori and Keith. They are consummate professionals, as we all know, and it's been wonderful. So thank you for that. And the third thing I wanted to share is that I wanted to give a special shout out to Representative Sherry Scouten. I spoke with her at length several times and with her staff, in addition to some other representatives, Tiffany Mitchell, Brad Witt, Ken Helm, and Senator Steiner Hayward and Senator Mark Hass. And I wanted to give a shout out to Sherry because she's worked especially hard to work with and contact our representative Suzanne Bonamici and her staff with regard specifically to the EPLP, the emergency, I never remember that anyway, the payroll, and I can't read my writing, so you know how that goes. But anyway, Sherry has worked really hard and her staff has worked really hard. And so I just wanted to give a shout out because she's one of our representatives who cares very much about what happens with our district. They wished us well. They wanted to know what they could do to help us. We've had a great back and forth with all of them. And I wanted to also say that I've been working with a board member on the North Coast Recreation District, which is in Nehalem. And she also reached out to her Congress folks and added their 2 cents worth to some of this as with regard to legislation as well. So I think it's working. It's harder, but that's okay. So thank you.
Wonderful updates. Thank you. I echo everything that my peers have said. I think one of the most critical roles and ways that we can impact in a positive way is continuing to build and be in contact with all of our local, state, and federal legislators. So I thank all of you for continuing to be in touch with them. It's clearly working. Have had great conversations with with the staff of Congresswoman Bonamici, as well as Wyden and Merkley. I'll do a shout out to Representative Courtney Neuron, who's been super responsive. I want to thank you, Ashley and Heidi, for those videos that you created. I want to do a very special thank you to Doug and for all his hard work, for being the captain of the ship, for answering all my emails, for answering all my calls, even on weekends. So thank you, Doug. And thank you, staff, for, my gosh, everything that you're doing, of course, really thinking outside the box. Really appreciate your responsiveness. At least two of you mentioned the advisory councils. I'm going to defer to Doug on that. I want to be mindful of staff. I know that everyone right now, regardless of where you work, we are all working outside of the scope of our job descriptions. And so I know our staff are at or beyond capacity right now. So I 100% understand and agree that our advisory councils are critical pieces to our responsiveness to this work, but I also want to be mindful of staff. So I'll wait to hear from Doug on that. So moving on to consent agenda. Unless Doug, sorry, Doug, did you want to chime in on anything?
No, we're A-okay.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
This is Heidi.
Yes. Oh,
Or go ahead, Ashley.
okay, sorry. This is Ashley. I move that the board approve the consent agenda as submitted.
This is Wendy, second.
Thank you. Jessica?
Heidi Edwards,
Yes.
Kia Ping,
Yes, sorry.
Wendy Kroger,
Yes.
Ashley Hartmeyer Prigg,
Yes.
Felicita Monteblanco.
Yes. We will jump right into new business. First up is our COVID-19 response efforts.
So I wanted to give a few comments before we have a more formal presentation PowerPoint for the board this evening. It's really, it's remarkable to think back a month ago when the board met. It was March 10th. We had a very full agenda. At the end of that meeting, we had a brief discussion about COVID and the responses we were managing via the county-led public health messaging at the time. And then, of course, 3 days later, our world looked quite different. In response to public health advice, we announced the first round of closures of our facilities. The change we experienced in those 3 days speaks to the pace of the changes we have sustained for literally over the last 4 or 5 weeks. Now, things are moving quickly, very quickly, to say the least. Simply put, this has been an unbelievable amount of activity over a 4 or 5 week period. Our staff has, as acknowledged, and I really appreciate that by the board, has worked incredibly hard. I want to personally thank and acknowledge our management team, the incident command team, which you'll hear more details about this evening, and many others in the organization that have really stepped up during this time. These haven't been short weeks, and I know that speaks for all of you as well as board members. They've been long, they've been tough, exhausting at times, but they've also united us. We are on the same page. We are devoted to bringing THPRD programs, classes, camps, sports, aquatics, and amenities back as quickly and as safely as possible. We are all committed to the importance of safety. I literally say to staff all the time that the actions we are taking today are saving lives. We're all involved in that. We are committed to ensuring the safety of our workers. Several of you mentioned staff, board members with regard to the staff who are still in the field. We thank them a great deal for the critical public service of keeping those functions alive because they are doing well. I also want to thank the board for your support. This hasn't been an easy month for you either, and your support standing with us as we navigate these challenges. It means a lot to staff. They have appreciated your words of support, your messages, your videos, and much more. Staff will walk you through a presentation this evening with greater detail on our response and what we're seeing as best as we can into the future. And of course, next week, we continue our budget process with a full presentation of the budget to the Budget Committee. While we still have a lot of unknowns, it is critical that we move forward with the budgeting process. I know it sounds unusual, and we are seeking approval for the maximum budget possible. It simply will be our blueprint. It'll be the starting point by which we react as we move into some level of hopefully programming in the summer. And of course, we'll be back revisiting that very same budget with the board, more than likely at that time, establishing lower spending thresholds, just depending on where we are with this whole process. I recently read an article, I was commenting to staff earlier, I think it was in the New York Times, reflecting the challenges of making sound decisions when there is more unknown than there is known. The analogy, interesting, Felicity, you should use captain of the ship. The analogy was that of sailing a large vessel in very heavy fog headed to port. You can only make good choices with what is known right in front of you. I'm confident we will make it to port, one decision at a time. With that, I want to turn it over to Aisha, who will kick off the more formal presentation.
Thank you, Doug.
Okay, you should have a presentation on your screen. Is that accurate? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you, Doug, for the introduction. I'd like to start the presentation with an overview of the timeline that's brought us to tonight. Okay. Here we go. So it was exactly 1 month ago today, March 14th, that marked a very significant event in our history. All of our facilities were closed to the public that Saturday morning due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We'd had several meetings in the week leading up to that day, with conversations that ultimately coalesced into an unprecedented decision to close district facilities for 2.5 weeks. Since then, things have moved quickly, very quickly. For the past month, it has felt as though as soon as we announced a change in a direction, we've had to mobilize for the next to adapt and respond to the challenges before us. These days have blended together, and in developing this timeline, it was astounding to several of us just how many decisions have been made, how many redirections have been accomplished, and this timeline shows some of those major events that we've dealt with in the last 4 weeks. So as you see, early in the event, we closed our centers, we canceled our events, and that was beginning on March 14th. And we were doing that based on all of the information that we had available at the time. We knew very, very much so that things were going to be different for quite some time, and that the normal work groups and strategies that we have for doing our tasks on a daily, weekly, monthly basis were going to be changed. And so as we came together as a management team and as other critical stakeholders and staff came together to talk about what our COVID response would be, we made the decision to activate an incident command system. And that allowed us to make some early strategic decisions about how we were going to respond to this crisis. Within just a few days, the schools were closed through April 28th, and that prompted us to extend our closures. We soon after closed our playgrounds and postponed our summer registration. And then on the Monday of spring break week, the 23rd, the governor issued her stay home, save lives order. And that prompted a whole new round of conversations. Soon after that decision, we made the decision to close all of our amenities, and we made the very difficult and challenging decision to separate nearly 800 part-time and seasonal employees. And these are folks that we value and consider integral to our organization. This pandemic is unlike anything we've ever experienced before, but district staff has risen to the challenge of finding our way in this new world. I'd like to take you through our incident command structure and describe to you how we're organizing our efforts as we move forward through our response to the pandemic. So while an incident command structure was initially developed for fighting wildland fires, its value really lies in the way it helps agencies cope with incidents of all kinds and complexity. This system can grow and contract based on the agency's needs, and most critically, it provides for a unified, centrally authorized emergency organization structure. So at the top of the page, you can see Doug as our general manager. Doug plays a critical role of deciding district policy, communicating with you, our board members, and serving as the chief intergovernmental relations liaison. In my role as incident commander, I established the structure for the response, including the activation of branches and creation of response units and teams. And within that command unit, there are two more positions, the public information officer and the safety officer. We saw early on the need for coordinated messaging, both inside and outside the organization, and Holly will share more information with you shortly about that. Mark Hawkinen, the district's risk and contracts manager, is serving as our safety and our physical distancing officer as we move through this event. We've activated 3 branches, the planning and operations branch, the logistics branch, and the finance branch. As our planning and operations chief, Keith is tracking current status inside and outside the district, identifying resources, defining scenarios to guide our decision-making, and leading response efforts, such as one partnership that just resulted in the opening of a shelter within the Elsie Stir Center. Keith Watson is serving as our logistics chief and has been making sure that we have all we need to respond to this pandemic. He leads the work of the redeployment, supplies, and customer service units. As finance chief, Lori leads a team of staff that tackles a whole new list of responsibilities in addition to the work they do every day for THPRD. The tracking that they're doing for this response effort positions us to seek recovery funding in the event it becomes available. Now, this next slide represents that we're not fully in incident response mode. There are also some areas of our agency that continue to perform a lot of business as usual functions. We're referring to these functions as our business continuity efforts, and they're a mix of departments that are largely unaffected by the changing environment. For example, finance staff continue to process payroll. We are continuing to work on producing a budget for next year. Our planning, design, and development work rolls on, but some of our other functions have changed dramatically. Field staff working in our maintenance and nature and trails departments are adjusting to new methods and service levels as a result of having fewer staff. Human Resources is processing unemployment claims, 300 plus since our separations at the end of March. And Information Services has completed a Herculean effort of getting as many of our staff working remotely as possible in order to comply with the governor's order. And I can't fail to mention the work that Joff is doing with the foundation, which you'll hear more about shortly, or the amount of community interaction Mark Pierce and our Park Patrol staff have had in the last 4 weeks. I do want to draw some attention to the boxes shown in orange on this screen. These teams represent functions we do every day and year round on the parks and recreation and communications areas, but we're tackling them in a much different way right now. Holly will tell you more in a bit about the social media team, but in recognition of the fact that these channels are the most direct route to our patrons right now, we've reallocated staff from the Park and Recreation Division to help her carry out her social media strategy. We've also created a programs continuity unit, which consists of 2 teams, the innovative programming team, which is working on new ways to engage with patrons, and our summer and fall programming team that will help us determine how we reopen, when we reopen, and what kinds of services we'll be able to provide when we're reopened. The summer and fall registration team has also been created to address the primary consideration of, once we know what summer will look like, how can we connect people with that programming? With that, I'd like to ask Keith to describe some of his work as the Planning and Operations Chief.
Thank you, Aisha. One of our responsibilities on the Planning and Operations team is to assess possible scenarios and then plan for them. To do this, we use a number of external tools, including reports from the Oregon Health Authority. This slide shows another tool we're using, which is data modeling from the University of Washington, and you probably have heard this referred to in several press or public official announcements. This slide projects peak resource use in terms of hospital beds and also peak death counts from the disease. This is the modeling you'll often hear cited that predicted 80,000 deaths in the United States and has now been reduced to 60,000. This chart for the US, which is as of today, shows that we're 4 days past peak resource demand, which occurred on April 10th. The next slide shows, this is the same modeling for Oregon, which shows peak resource use projected on April 26th. More importantly, though, and really the good news for Oregon is through this modeling, it shows that we have effectively flattened the curve and peak resource use is well within the available capacity. So that's why we're taking social distancing and enforcement of our closures very seriously, because it's part of the reason Oregon is doing well. The following slide, this is another graph from the same model that predicts peak daily deaths in Oregon, and it predicts the peak will be April 27th. Part of why we show this is that it also shows the projected end of the daily COVID deaths, which on this model is projected for June 11th. This had been mentioned by Oregon and Washington governors as a potential trigger for when they might relax some of their stay-at-home orders, and that trigger was usually 10 days after the last death. However, just today in the governor's announcement this morning for the framework for reopening, she's since indicated that this is no longer her trigger, and the framework that she's talked about will be the trigger instead. So if we could go to the next slide. We've been using this information to do scenario planning and try and prepare for the alternate outcomes. And I would really describe this in 3 phases. The first phase, which you've already heard a lot about, we were trying to anticipate how large the impact could be, and actual events very quickly overran our planning. As you've already heard, within less than 2 weeks, we moved from cancellation of some large events in March and minor program adjustments at some of our facilities to full facility closures and program cancellations to eventually a stay-at-home order that closed even more of our amenities. Where we are now is doing financial modeling and operation planning based on how long the closure stays in place. While there's some talk nationally about limited reopenings by the end of April, what we're hearing in Oregon is mid-May at the earliest, and based on the modeling updates, mid to late June is a possibility. The governor, again, laid out today very specific milestones that must be met, including testing and case counts before relaxing the current stay-at-home orders. Go to the next slide. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. Once we have some idea, the final phase in our modeling and our scenario planning, once we have some idea of when reopening can take place, we'll see what restrictions remain in place and what that means for programs we can offer. Thank you. We'll also need to be very strategic in which facilities we can reopen at which times. Neither the staffing, available staffing, or the demand for programs make it likely that everything will reopen at once. So that will be our next phase of planning. Okay, now, thank you. This is a decision-making tool that we borrowed from a government finance officer's presentation, and I think it kind of reinforces what Doug mentioned, because it shows the difficulty in planning for multiple scenarios when there are so many future contingencies. As much as we want to predict the best course and plan for it and have clear answers, it's difficult, but we need to be patient and make decisions on the information we have available, and that decision-making will be sequential as more information becomes available to us. So the next slide. So what we do know right now, we've assessed the impact to our revenues of the facility closures. Since it's extremely unlikely that facilities will reopen on May 1st, we'll focus on the second 2 possibilities. The complete closure through May will result in the cumulative loss of program revenue of about $2.5 million. And through June, this cumulative loss will grow to $4.4 million. Knowing this revenue loss, we've already taken steps to reduce expenses to help offset this, and these reductions are shown on the slide. The operating cost reductions won't fully offset the revenue losses, so we're also looking at deferring or eliminating some general fund funded capital projects to help further offset these losses. Because the closure hit so suddenly and we had little time to plan for it, it is likely there will be some reduction in our cash carry forward into next year, but we're taking all steps to minimize this impact. And as we get closer to the year end, we'll have better estimates on what that impact to cash carry forward will be. We're currently working on developing similar projections into next fiscal year, but we will also build these so we can assess site by site in case we're able to do limited or staggered reopenings. And then the final slide for me. Finally, I want to point out our advocacy work, and many of you board members have mentioned this as well. And I can't thank you enough for your engagement. It is really helping us. We're working at both the federal and state level to try and secure relief for the Park District. Federally, we're tracking the various response bills and weighing in where appropriate. Part of this is responding to the requirements of the bills, such as the additional sick leave that was made available to our staff, but also trying to gain eligibility for participating in the payroll tax credit problem to help offset the cost of those leave programs. To date, through 2 bills passed, we have not been able to secure that, but we're hoping with additional bills, and we're hearing that there could be a 4th or even a 5th response bill. We're hoping in those that those tax credits will become available to us. We're also watching for an anticipated state emergency session and have been sharing information and priorities with our state legislative delegation, as all of you have, and working with our professional associations to become a common voice for those as well. With that, I will turn it over to Holly.
Good evening, everyone. I wanted to talk about our work in the communications team, focusing first on internal communications. In a very difficult time, I think this has been a real bright spot for the district. You know, we typically send out 1 employee newsletter a month. And one of the things we realized very quickly at the incident command team was how critical it was that we really upped our work to communicate with our employees. So instead of a once a month newsletter, we've invested in communicating twice a week with all staff through an employee newsletter. Those newsletters come out every Tuesday and every Friday. I thought they'd have a small handful of topics. I was absolutely wrong. They're running 6 to 8 topics in them. And I was looking back on them preparing for this presentation, and as Aisha was talking about the speed with which we're moving through these, forgetting content that we'd even produced, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, it feels like the dinosaur age. That's how quickly things are moving. So our intent is to be very intentional to remind our employees that we're all THPRD ambassadors, no matter where we sit in the organization, how important it is that we all have a firm, grounded perspective on what amenities are able to share those with a staff person who does not attribute where the question came from, and the incident command team answers those questions. And all of our staff who are working remotely have adjusted to Microsoft Teams that we're using tonight. I know that staff feel like they're meeting more. There's a lot of meetings happening, and people have their regular supervisors they report to and their special teams that they're on. And we're on this tool all day long, doing all of our work interactively on it. I also want to give a really special shout out to Christine Hoffman, our HR manager. She is leading the employee support group. It was the first team to really mobilize and get going. And really, that was born from the having to release all of our part-time personnel. That was very devastating to the organization, and it was really important to us to focus on the morale of how people were feeling about what we were dealing with, but also create a space for peer-to-peer support. So this group originally started working on how to support our separated part-time employees, how to help managers and supervisors communicate with those employees by creating supervisor toolkits, challenging us to communicate with our separated employees every couple of weeks, creating the email templates that we could send to those employees to keep them updated, creating an external page on our website so separated employees could see the same updated information that our full-time employees were seeing on the public website. And also digging in to find out how we could support this group. So they put a survey together to say what more could we do right now, and they're putting together some innovative ideas. They've also worked on creating morale for our employees that are working today. We know that a lot of folks coming to work was really a social aspect of their lives. And the employee support group is doing a lot of reminders for us. For those of us that are working from home, how do you set up your space ergonomically? How do you create a schedule? How do you make sure you shower every day and do some stretches and some things that we should do that we might not do if we're working from home in our pajamas? And then how do we get together? So how do we create virtual ways for us to interact and keep our THPRD identity and connectivity? So that group is pretty amazing. And you can see the heavy investment in our employee communications right now. I always say, you hear people talk about over communicating. I really feel like we've gotten so many thank yous from staff, and they feel like they're getting information as quickly as they can. And we're trying to not only answer the questions that they have from an employee perspective, but give them all the tools to answer all the questions that we're getting from a public perspective. So it's really been a real emphasis for us in the communications team. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about public communications. So a couple weeks ago, I think 2 weeks now, is when our social media team was officially formed, and they have hit the ground running. There was some real talent in the park and rec pool of folks who had video production experience, and they've been putting together really cool videos. You're going to start seeing on our social media channel more video programming. We're taking our messages from incident command teams. So what are the priority messages that we need to get out there? You know, right now, a big point of interest is making sure that the public knows how we're being responsive on physical distancing, all the work that we're doing to try to make that happen on our parks and trails, and really shining a spotlight on some of the, unfortunate things that are happening that we're having to combat, so people know how responsive we're being. We also will be supporting the innovative program team and putting together, helping them with website and social media posts about the programming that will be available for the public during the closure period. We have a really robust COVID-19 webpage. It's updated daily. We're also removing all the events that have been canceled from their daily, so people can check to see what's going on. We have 7 pages of frequently asked questions, lots of topics, questions around how do I get a refund? When will I get a refund? When will the park district open back up? How are decisions made? All of that is in the FAQs. I'm kind of smiling as I look at the sign picture on the slide, because those signs feel like a lifetime ago. But we worked on signs for all of the parks, and now we're working on additional waves of supplemental signs that we need. It was important to us that the signs be in English and Spanish, and I will say we did share them on statewide and national channels to make sure that people saw these, and we got a lot of thank yous from other agencies because we were so early with our signage, and we were really happy to help. And we're also working on call logs. So we're definitely tracking what are the questions that are coming in from the public, and we're trying to front load as much as we can our messaging going out the door to be responsive both to the priority issues coming from incident command, but also the most common questions that we're getting from the public. We'll be doing more video and more responding to those in multiple ways to try to get the messages out. And finally, I will just say, to the speed of everything, as I had, as Aisha said, I was one of the people that had a real kind of humbling reaction to the timeline and the sequence. And when you think of every step along the way, from canceling summer registration to the reduction in force, to the closing of facilities, to the extension of the closure of facilities, to the closure of amenities, to trying to communicate what's allowed, each one of those has so many components of communication work that has to be done. And each one of those are a major event in and amongst themselves. And there's been so many of those over the last month. So it's just kind of a world we're living in right now where you kind of forget what you did last Friday because you're just focused on what's ahead of you today. That's all I got.
Great. Well, this is Jeff, and good evening. I wanted to give a quick report, very quick report on foundation activities up to date. And I wanted to start by just saying that, you know, the foundation's job is to secure resources for the great work that goes on at THPRD. And we're still working on that. We're still applying for grants and funding. And this includes applying to, you know, our crop of Oregon foundations that have opened new COVID response windows. So if they've opened up a window, we've put a response in, and we put an application in, and we do this, you know, we're always hopeful that we'll get the money, but by applying, you learn and you get feedback. And we want to know what's going on and what's resonating out there. In addition to that, we're applying for grant funding that's consistent with the Access for All program fund campaign that we had begun before we shut down. But the emphasis is squarely on supporting financial assistance, because we know as we start to emerge from this, that's going to be incredibly important to serving our community and getting patrons back into programming. I also wanted to just say that the foundation is supporting you know, the efforts that Aisha touched on, and we'll speak on a little bit more after this, of our programmers to start trying to figure out, you know, the things that we can do now and how we get ready for reopening. As Keith said, it's going to be a staggered process. But as we know more, the foundation should be able to seek resources that will help us as the protocols shift from the governor's office, and we can start responding to community needs through programming. The foundation can deploy some existing resources and raise new funds for needs associated with programs, whether these are materials, supplies, equipment, space, and possibly even personnel related. The foundation, of course, has its own operation, and Heidi had mentioned Eileen Kravitz. She's been doing a wonderful job keeping the foundation moving along and making sure that we're submitting for federal assistance that should be available to us. So we very recently finished off the small business loan application that's available through a federal window, and we've submitted that. We're looking at other federal assistance now, the disaster relief fund window, for example, and then also at some, also looking at some private outlets as well for possible assistance. And then just finally, wanted to mention that, you know, we're doing our best to keep, as all this information comes out that Holly has spoken of, you know, we're keeping the board and our trustees and our donors and our volunteers informed, and just making sure that people know that the foundation is there and is at work, and reminding people the good work that we did. You may have noted recently a postcard from Eileen expressing appreciation. And then also we wanted to shout out for the Beaverton Chamber Organization, because they're keeping the THPF visible on their website. We appreciate that. We're asking for trustee input from time to time, and trustees are ready to get involved. At this point, we're still planning to hold our May 20 Park Foundation Board of Trustees meeting. So we're excited about that. So that's where things stand presently, and I'll hand it back over to Aisha.
All right, thank you, Joff. Just circling back at the end of this presentation to share with you what we're doing now and what we're very excited about. As I mentioned, we have a innovative programming group that is looking at what can we do right now in light of our restrictions on being in centers working together. But we're also taking a longer view at what might we be able to offer this coming summer, and depending on what amount of summer we will have. So this team is being led by Sabrina Taylor-Schmidt and Kathy Ellis, and they've got a number of staff with them. Within our Park and Recreation division, we have about 100 full-time and regular part-time staff who really were challenged with doing their day-to-day duties with centers closed and with no programs being run. And so with all of those folks, we have, through the logistics branch and the redeployment unit, found places for those staff to work. So we have, under the program's continuity umbrella, we have the summer and fall group, and they are looking at all of the scenarios that you see here. And so that involves multitude of scenarios based on when we can start programming, whether it's June, July, August, September, or later. But then also we're looking at high, medium, and low levels of programming for each one of those start dates. And the reason why we're doing that is because we don't know how many facilities will be able to open right away. We don't know how many different types of programming we'll be able to offer. We don't know what the restrictions are going to be on us in terms of physical distancing, and we don't know, based on economics, what the public demand for our programs are going to be. So this group is separated into multiple subgroups, and they're looking at all the different things that would have to happen in order for us to provide programming. And so this is a tremendous amount of work that's only just getting kicked off. But if you're wondering where all of these program staff have gone, a lot of them have gone into this group to figure out what these different scenarios mean for us. Another group, the other group, the Innovative Programming Group, is orienting themselves in a whole new way. And so when I say that staff have been relocated from their centers, they're now working from home primarily on these different groups. And innovative programming was really founded out of this crisis of identity that we were having on the Park and Recreation division side, where we looked at our organization whose mission, our critical function, is to provide park and recreation services to the community. But what happens when the recreation half of the Park and Recreation agency can't do its job the way it's done it for decades? And so we really started thinking about what opportunity this terrible crisis has afforded us. And it has pushed us in sometimes uncomfortable ways to really define how we serve our community. And can we do it in different ways? Can we utilize technology? And can we think creatively about how we connect with our patrons? And so this innovative programming group started out as sort of our spring programming group. We had these ideas that perhaps we could offer small batch recreation, still consistent with physical and social distancing requirements. And as more information comes available, as further clarification is offered from the government, we've had to adjust that. And so now innovative programming really looks more like, what are we able to provide through digital means? And so what our mission is to still look for ways to connect people, parks, and nature, while also just demonstrating the value that we bring as a recreation provider to our community. So our goals of this effort are to develop content that we can then deliver through our various social media channels. And we want to provide some activities and experiences that patrons sitting mostly at home all day are craving. And so our focus areas are for a diversity of programs. We're looking at what logistics it takes to pull off these different programs, and we're looking at different ways that we can engage with folks. So overall, what we think this group is going to be able to provide us is a whole new framework with how we engage with our community, both now and into the future. So it's something that none of us have really had the impetus to do or the opportunity. And so we're seeing it as that. We're seeing it as an opportunity for us to grow and change and meet the needs of our community. So our strategy with this work is to identify all these different programming focus areas. And so this innovative programming group, as Holly said, is working with social media, because what we envision is the programming focus areas, which represent staff from across the Park and Recreation Division. We've got nature, we've got after school, we've got preschool, we have aquatics, we have all of our staff. Then we're taking a cross-disciplinary approach to this effort. And so we're representing all of these different ways that people engage with us, and we're trying to provide them with content that then is rolled out through the social media strategy that Holly and her team develop. So these are just a picture of the different areas that we are currently developing content. We're working on developing what's essentially an online or a virtual recreation center where we can provide classes. We can video record and provide classes. We can come up with activities like scavenger hunt and the current coloring contest. And these are ways to still stay within the forefront of the minds of our patrons, provide them with things to do with their children, to do with their older adult family members. And we want to provide this new picture of what recreation means to our community. So this is something we are thrilled about. It represents the future for our organization. And we are at the end of our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have for us.
Thank you, Aisha, so much. My brain is slightly full, but in the best way, of course. For my peers, I'll make a few statements but get your questions ready, and let's have you mention which staff member it goes to, just because this is a little different with doing this all virtually. So again, Aisha, thank you. Really appreciate all your leadership during this time as lead of the Incident Command Center. And I appreciate all the creativity, of course. Messaging has been fantastic. Thank you, Holly. I just appreciate everyone's responsiveness so much. I love some of the creativity. I love the Easter egg idea that y'all did. I colored some and put them in my window, hoping that kiddos would play. So before I do my questions, I'm going to let my peers take the lead on that. So I'll just try to go alphabetically. Ashley, do you have questions?
Thank you, Felicita. I just want to say how impressed I am at the way that a district our size is able to act so swiftly and so nimbly and so creatively to all of this. I've been impressed every day, and seeing it all in one package like this, it's kind of hard to not be a little bit overwhelmed with gratitude. And but for me, it does really show just the breadth of how widespread this is. So thank you, because I know all of your lives have been upended and you are responding so beautifully. Keith, I do want to say that our delegation have all mentioned your efforts. So as much as we're trying, I think that THPRD's reputation as being important in our community is all due to the amazing work staff has done. And I think that it's why I will say when we are able to get some relief, it's because they know that we are so important to our community. So I really don't have any questions. I'm just truly amazed, and I love being included on the communications. I love the ergonomic reminders. My setup at home is terrible. So again, you're going to hear a lot of thanks from us, because it's just been amazing to see what you're all doing. And so my only question is the same, and Doug is probably tired of hearing it, and Felicia is probably tired of asking it, but it's just, please let us know what we can do to help you and support you, because we're willing. I'll speak just for myself. I'm willing. So if there's anything I can do to help, please let me know.
I know that all 5 of us are doers, and so, and I know Doug is sharing that with leadership, and I do have some ideas at the end, and I do have Doug's permission to mention it, so I'll share those at the end. Heidi, questions?
I'm echoing everything that Ashley said. It's incredibly impressive. I don't have any particular questions other than I did write down a question early on about, my heart and life was all about summer camps. I needed summer camps and recreation for my kids in the summer. And so I'm really excited to see how we're being innovative. Aisha, thank you for sharing some of the programming focus areas that you're looking at as we're schooling our kids right now at home. How do we transition to that in the summer, because our families are still going to be at home, likely, somewhat, but very likely, and what that looks like as they transition out of the school district or in their schooling into opportunities we offer. So I'm really grateful that that is being given full consideration. Also very impressed with the communication that is going out to employees. I think the most heartbreaking thing for me and likely my board members as well was having to separate, from our part-time folks, but it's great to see the initiatives moving forward to support them and to engage our current employees with keeping connected to them. So I really appreciate that. I think my only question, I do have one, is just thinking, Keith, whenever we have a sense of what our next ask is, let us know. I know this last week, it was the payroll tax credit, and, we'll keep fighting for what we need to help the district. So thank you, everyone, for the amazing work.
Thank you, Heidi. Tia, questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. No, everything that Ashley and Heidi said, working at the hospital and doing at Kaiser Westside and doing all the planning, like, I understand completely how fast things are changing and having to plan for different scenarios constantly. And so I can appreciate our staff's difficulties and unsureness, but we're, as a board, I know we're so proud and so thankful to have each and every one of you guys just take it on and be so flexible and be so innovative, and it's just really wonderful. And I know from a family and parent perspective, everyone I talk to within like schools, on my mom blogs and all that kind of stuff, all of my friends, everybody's waiting and just ready to sign up for all of these summer things. Not that we don't love our kids, but we're just waiting to be able to set them out there. They're waiting to get out there in this perfect weather and just really experience something else than being at home. So I know the demand, at least for young families, and will be there for whenever we decide to open. I did have a couple questions about maybe for Aisha about that innovative program, as far as what you see or what's coming up. I know as like a young mom, everybody is looking for certain things to do and like directions and schedules or things. And like, there's been lots of different resources, like Scholastic does kind of a daily kind of agenda kind of thing. And then, you found like, or we found, at least in our family, different cosmic yogas on YouTubes and stuff like that. And that has been super helpful. And I know all families are talking about, what resources, what we can send our kids to, or what we can schedule our time. So this innovative program is wonderful. And I think it's a perfect opportunity to really keep at least young families and children really engaged with the district. But so I just wanted to see if how close we are as to launching something, and then is it going to be, I'm assuming, or is there a charge for it? I know maybe for future, that's going to be something like a virtual online class or something that maybe we can charge for. But in the meantime, is there anything short term that we're thinking about as far as like creating something to keep our young families engaged and offer some kind of help? And then as far as another option for young families, I was just trying to see if now that we know school is closed for the rest of the year, and especially like being a healthcare worker and an essential worker, I do know people are still having a hard time with finding daycare that also meets the standards for Governor's Brown regarding limits and the amount of kids in one space and whatnot. So I wasn't sure if our district has looked into, as our facilities are closed, maybe opening up rooms to be able to help with any of those daycare situations for essential workers, since maybe we're set up a little bit special in that we can keep like one room to 10 kids and the same 10 kids and that kind of thing.
Sure, I'm happy to respond to that. I'll respond to the last item first, if that's okay. So with the governor's instruction to the state about childcare specifically, that task has largely been pushed toward the school districts, and they have similar setups with the rooms that they can use. And so Beaverton School District has taken the lead on providing the childcare for children of essential workers. And so we've been in touch with the school district. We've said, let us know if there's anything we can help with, but they are leading that charge. And after a slow start, their program is growing. I think they initially only had a few children participating at like 3 different sites, and their sites have grown and participation has grown. So we think that that's largely meeting the needs there. On our facilities, what we've focused on in terms of those sites is we're in the process this week of sanitizing and closing up our district facilities. And we're doing that as a cost-cutting measure, both to, we have our staff now largely working from home. Those that cannot telecommute will be redeployed to other sites, such as park maintenance. And so with those staff all out of the buildings, we can now recover some utility costs, and we can keep those locked up until they're needed again. In terms of the innovative programming, I can tell you that Doug and I are getting an update this Thursday from the team on all the work that they're doing. But using this MS Teams platform, I'm able to dip in and take little peeks at the work that they're doing. And so right now, this team of folks has been researching all kinds of different options. They're also responding to the numerous screen captures I send them from Instagram of all the ideas that I'm picking up around the world. And so we've got a structure for developing different content that is kind of fun and, things you can do with your family. We're also looking at enrichment content. So all those folks that have for years run our really great after school programs, they're looking at how can we provide kind of a learning opportunity for folks. We're looking at, can we provide virtual music classes? So the things that the very young, like my 2-year-old toddler, can participate in addition to doing fitness classes that are geared towards the patrons that would normally be taking those at the STIR Center. So we've got a huge list of content areas we want to go after and develop the content for. And that's when we can start pushing it out. So we've got to get the content first, but that is being worked on now. And so we've got everything mapped out. It's a matter of recording and placing in a single location where all this information can live, and then pushing it out via the social media channels. So I'll have a better answer for you in terms of when you can see these things after our debriefing on Thursday, but it is happening and we're really excited about it.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for your work. It's amazing.
Wendy?
Hi, yes. First of all, thank you very much for a great presentation. I've seen bits and pieces and it was well put together, so it really helps to see it organized this way. So thank you for that. I second my fellow board members' compliments of the staff and the great efforts you've made for both externally to our public and to our patrons, And also, I really applaud staff's efforts to be transparent in terms of communication with our own staff. I think it can be very challenging to us. We assume everybody understands we're all in this together. It's really tough and we're all gonna, fight together and come out the other side. But sometimes it's really, really helpful to be very transparent to the people who are below this level, staff-wise, who need some just reassurance. And with that in mind, I wanted to say that I'm so pleased that Christine is taking the employee support group where she's taking it. I think it's just incredibly beneficial, both to staff that we have hopefully temporarily lost, but also the ones that are coming up next that are a little worried. So I really appreciate that effort, and I just wanted to give her a shout out on that. And finally, I would just say, I know it takes more time for Doug, especially because he funnels it to us, but for all of you to answer our questions and to keep us engaged. But we do want to stay engaged and we do want to help. So I thank you for that. Letting us know, keep letting us know what we can do, and we'll do it. So there's nothing better than supporting what you guys are doing, and we appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope the staff feel very loved. We love and appreciate you all so much. I know these are complicated times. I know one of the ways that we will be able to help in the future is an employee assistance fund of some kind. So I'm hopeful that, Joff, I don't expect an answer right now. Doug has been talking to us and I've been keeping everyone updated, but we look forward to helping in that capacity when we can. I don't know if you want to, sorry, you unmuted yourself. Do you want to say something?
Oh, no, I was just getting prepared.
Yeah. No tough questions. I promise. I know you're working so hard and I know we've hit some hurdles that we had not planned on. So certainly appreciate your diligence. And we're going to do everything we can to help. I want to say thank you to Clint and Jessica and Holly, who made sure this whole phone call could even exist. I'm wishing there were more patrons on it, because all that information was amazing and so helpful to understand how decisions are being made and why. And I think I wish our patrons knew all that, and I know you're working on making sure that they do. I also echo regarding the communications with our separated staff. I think that's fantastic, and very much related. I saw in a recent employee newsletter, I think this question is more for Doug, that staff are helping our separated employees in various ways, and that the two greatest needs were running errands and phone calls to really address that social isolation. And I'm curious, Doug, if that is an appropriate way for us to volunteer our time, if that's something that I want to be mindful of, HR and all that. But I also know we have 5 enthusiastic people who want to help.
Well, certainly we can push into that to figure out how frequently is it occurring and so forth, in order to give you a more complete answer. So I think I'll get back to you on that as far as the details. Again, the offer to help is phenomenal, and the recognition, of course, on the staff side is just that alone is quite substantial. Of course, the mechanisms by which we can actually engage are sometimes challenging, especially with former staff members. But we're doing everything we can to keep those doors open and keep active and keep communicating.
And I know we're learning so much in this process, and I know none of us imagined doing the exact things that we're doing right now. So I certainly appreciate everyone's leadership and flexibility. Finally, the last thing I want to share, because all of us on this phone call, and my peers on the board are all doers. I know everybody wants to help. I did reach out to the lead at Project Homeless Connect, who's managing the shelter that we are hosting, and which I can never thank THPRD enough for doing this. This is just out of the box thinking, and I greatly appreciate it. But she let me know that their 2 biggest needs right now are t-shirts for the men, because they mostly have their winter clothes, and so they need t-shirts so they can stay cool, as well as latex gloves, large size. If you can find those, let me know. I was all over Amazon not having any luck, but there's also volunteer opportunities as well. And I know related to LC Stir, Meals on Wheels is somewhat at capacity for their volunteers for the Beaverton location, which is obviously a wonderful problem to have. But there's other locations to help with. So there's ways for all of us to help.
If I could add to Felicita, we did have a little segment on, well, it will be on, it's been filmed already with Fox Channel 12 News for the 10 p.m. tonight with regard to the shelter. And Holly was out on site.
Staying up.
Yep.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Any other questions? Any other things the staff want to share? Well, I'll go to my peers first. Peers, any other questions regarding COVID-19 response efforts?
No.
Doug or any of our other leaders, any other things you want to mention about COVID-19 response?
No, I think we're pleased with the package staff was able to put together. You know, like everything, it was rather reflective when you see it all together at one spot. It's like, wow, a lot has transpired. You know, I think it is a substantial effort, a major lift by staff, but
yes,
I think it really speaks to the quality of staff when they care enough that they want to get this right.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So if it's all right with everyone, we're going to move right on to metro natural areas.
Perfect. We're going to get, I think, between Janine and Keith.
Yeah, I'm going to try and get the PowerPoint loaded. Can you all see this PowerPoint now?
You bet.
Okay, hopefully it will advance for me. That will be even better. Okay. So of the $475 million bond that Metro Parks passed, that was passed by voters last year, 92 million of that is designated to support local projects, or as we commonly call it, the local share funds. The bond identified eligible local share investments, which are shown on the slide. Metro intends to make the funds available to local jurisdictions to implement their projects, as long as they follow Metro's commitment to racial equity and community engagement. Local share funds are allocated directly to cities, counties, and park districts on a per capita basis. Based on this allocation, THPRD will receive a local share of just over $8.6 million. And this is based on the THPRD population that's outside the city of Beaverton. Beaverton, based on their population, will receive an allocation of approximately $5.7 million. We've been in communication with city staff on jointly developing a project list for the city share. They're receptive to that approach. Unfortunately, with the COVID-related impacts and people working out of the office, these discussions haven't progressed for the last couple of months. As a result, tonight's discussion will focus just on the projects outside the city that will be funded with the THPRD direct allocation. To start the process of identifying projects, we formed a staff team with staff from a variety of departments. We began by creating a broad list of potential projects from existing sources, including parks, trails, natural area functional plans. We also use the Systems Development Charge, CIP, or Capital Improvement Program, and maintenance replacement schedules, as well as concept plans and known needs of amenities that we knew needed enhancement. In compiling our list of projects, we used the Metro local share eligible uses and program criteria as initial filters. And in the end, we started with a master list of 33 projects inside the city and 22 outside the city. We then used criteria to prioritize these projects. Equity, we used existing assessment from the functional plans to rank or to assign an equity score to the projects or an equity ranking. We used vision alignment based on the initial findings, especially projects that were consistent with the 4 goal areas that are coming out of our vision findings. Opportunity for outside leverage. This is specifically focused on grants or funds from other agencies outside THPRD or Metro. And we focused on projects that met multiple THPRD plan objectives, such as addressing a functional plan and an area-specific concept plan, or a functional plan and an ADA transition plan component. We acknowledged those projects that had strong community support. And finally, we looked at projects that completed a site, such as a phase 2 of a development. And those were all criteria that didn't apply to every project, but those projects that had those criteria scored higher or were ranked higher as a result of that. In addition to the prioritization criteria, we assess projects against filters that would effectively deprioritize projects. We assess projects against the availability of other THPRD or Metro funding. Local share isn't the only source of funding from the Metro bond. For instance, some of our trail segments or significant trail and barriers are identified for funding within the trails funds in the bond. So we focused on projects that weren't eligible for SDC funding within THPRD or another source of Metro funding, or projects that weren't already captured within our maintenance replacement program. We assessed the overall size of the projects against available resources. With just over $8.5 million of available funding, we didn't want 1 or 2 large projects that would use all the available funds. So we tried to create a blend of project size, what I was sometimes referring to as a pyramid approach, where we might have 1 large project, 1 to 2 medium projects, and 3 to 4 smaller projects, just to try and get the maximum benefit from the allocation of the funds we had. And finally, we assessed uncertainties about our ability to complete the projects. For example, did we have easement or site control issues that even if we wanted to do the project would make our ability to complete it unknown? So with all of these prioritization criteria and filters, the 22 projects that were outside the city were narrowed to the list that's presented tonight. We felt like it was a mix of new amenities and acquisitions, along with refurbishment and renovation of existing sites. There are a couple phase 2 developments that complete sites begun with other funding sources. I won't walk through each of these individual projects, and we have provided the prioritization spreadsheet previously, but I can come back to answer any questions on any of these specific projects. Finally, we just want to conclude by showing the geographic distribution of the projects that are for a defined site. 2 of the projects, land acquisition and accessible play structures, don't have defined sites at this point. I also want to point out these are again, our only projects outside the city, which is why you see some of the distribution that you do. And we are still planning on working with the city to allocate funds for projects inside the city. So that's an initial run through of where we're at with these projects. And I will back up to the previous project slide because that's probably a good place to stop and ask if there are any questions.
Thank you. This has clearly been really well thought out, and I appreciate leadership's hard work on this and all the things that went to influence this. And I know it was a lot of work getting ready for this. And this is an exciting project to have and to think about for the future of the district and the patrons. You touched on a couple of the things that I was concerned about already, so I won't ask those questions, so thank you. Before my peers ask questions, I do just want to say, in case my peers disagree, that I do think it's really important. I know we are in the midst of a pandemic, but I do think it's critical that we get going on these projects as soon as we can, and to, encourage Metro to get those dollars out. This represents a lot of jobs and people being able to work, and really exciting benefit, including mental and physical health benefit to our patrons and even surrounding areas. So with that, we'll let my peers ask their questions. Mix up the order a little bit. Let's start with Heidi.
I don't have any questions. I just, I appreciate all the detail that's been provided in the documents that have been shared with us in the past, and agree, you know, as much as we can move forward with these, excited to be able to do so, knowing that we still have work to do with City of Beaverton. So,
Thank you, Heidi. Wendy?
Thank you. A couple of things. One is, I know that we have all along said that we want to work with the City of Beaverton. Are we doing something similar? That this would be one question. Are we doing something similar with Washington County? Again, for coordination, that would be one question. Do you want to, does staff want to play with that and then I go on from there, or do you want me to just ask them all?
Let's do one question at a time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Like he's what he wants, sorry.
Yeah, we are having discussions with Washington County. The situation's a little different because Washington County's allocation is really for the population that's outside a city or a park district, versus the cities, which is an allocation of the residents in the city who are also inside THPRD. That said, I think Washington County is very interested in working with us and helping identify projects that would work well with us, but theirs is a fairly small allocation that has to spread over a fairly wide area. So I wouldn't expect that we'll see significant contributions to projects inside the district, but I know they do want to work with us and collaborate on lists.
Great. That was my major concern, is that we just work at spread it as far as we can, as equitably as we can. So that was my concern, because I didn't hear anything specifically about working with Washington County. So thank you. I also shared an email with Doug previously, and I did get some answers to my questions, but I did not share them with this email with my peers. And I still remain concerned about a couple of things. One is that I really am concerned that we make sure that we deal with the highest priorities of the Metro Bond, and that's highest priorities, and that includes climate resilience. It also includes much more nature and trails. I still wonder about a couple of items on this list meeting that criteria. I know we can do anything we want, but I really would rather that we meet the highest priorities, and I would urge that we do that. For example, I know we need a sport court. However, I'm hoping that there are other funds available for something like that, as well as accessible play structures. I'm very much for accessible play structures if they happen to end up being nature play, and they happen to end up in natural areas or near natural areas in our parks or on our trails. But I would like to have that connection. I think the other thing that I was a little concerned about was I absolutely agree with the Willow Creek piece, but I would like to have us take a look at the east side also, not just the far west end. So those are all things that I'm mostly concerned that we make sure that we go to the highest priority, both in terms of the natural areas and in terms of climate resilience. So I'm not going to nitpick which one should go where, but I just mentioned the ones that I did just to show my concern about that. So if we can move forward and maybe make me a little happier on those, I'd be thrilled. So thank you.
I mean, I guess I'll just comment that I think that the bond was pretty broad in what we're allowed to do. I think that staff have done a really good job of making of doing a variety of projects. One of the projects I just want to highlight is Mountain View Champions Park's Forecourt. One, because it is in one of the most diverse areas of the district, in a low income area of the district. And it is an entirely ADA accessible park. So I think that, as one example, very much aligns with the values of the district, or sorry, of the bond. So I don't share your concerns, Wendy. I certainly appreciate that you brought them up, and I know you are an fierce advocate for natural resources, and I love that about you. So I don't know if Keith or Doug want to respond to that, but we can also go to more questions.
Well, if I could just comment real quick, I think, the balance of this is the full appreciation of the rest of the Metro bond measure, because there are phenomenal natural resource acquisition funds available. There are all kinds of trail monies, which we have identified projects within. So, I mean, the great news is we get to have harder discussions about where we get to spend our local share.
Mhm.
The wonderful news is wow, it's a lot of money, and spreading it out, respecting that, resources are only going to get tighter as we launch into next fiscal. So I would agree. I mean, the primary concern would be we need to get maximum value for every one of these dollars.
Yeah, I appreciate the story that this tells as well, that it's spread across the district, that it's a lot of different things that folks, regardless, I mean, all of us know because we've run campaigns, we've talked to voters, that every household has something really specific that they care about. And that's fine. We are a full service parks agency, but that's just fine if your thing is trails, if your thing is parks, if your thing is uh, sports courts. So I think this tells a really wonderful story. And yeah, Doug, like you said, I mean, there's going to be all these other grant opportunities as well. And we also know that if the 2020 transportation bond passes, there will be opportunities there to apply for money for trails, and we want our patrons to see trails as a transportation option. So yeah, so I'm gonna I want to move forward in conversation. Ashley.
Sorry, I was I had the Metro bond thing up and realized I couldn't control my microphone from there. So I think I'm just slightly confused by Wendy's concern, just because as I read the criteria and as I look at our list, I thought there was a really nice job of kind of meeting all of those criteria that were outlined. So anyways, I like to see the list. I like that it is covering all parts of our district and really looking, I like that the GRASP analysis was used in determining these projects. I think my only question would be, do we have any idea on timeline? Like, first, does Metro have to approve our list? And then second, like how quickly could this happen that we would be having funds and getting going on these projects?
Well, maybe I could start, Keith, and then you can correct me. This has been an interesting discussion because I was on the phone with Jonathan Blasher, the director on the park side, and we've had this ongoing discussion. I've been reminding him that we are bringing our list to our board, and the hope and aspiration is that Metro is still moving forward, and they've had their share of impact with regard to COVID. Obviously, this bond package sits to the side and theoretically is not directly impacted, but it also takes some of the same administrative load to keep moving forward. And that has been my message, and I've communicated that with Lisa, and she has encouraged us to continue, put it on the agenda. We need to keep moving. We want to bring the city along with us side by side. So the more formal process is that we will eventually will need a adopted list by you all for certainly the list that we are directly engaged in, and ideally we have a cooperative list with the city of Beaverton, so it's a unified approach. And I will be calling Jonathan Blasher tomorrow to say we had our discussion. The board is very encouraged. We want to keep moving, so please keep moving. The quicker you get the money accessible, that it's a lift for our direct community out here.
Wonderful. I completely forget if I haven't called on Heidi or Tia.
You did call on me already, yes.
Okay. Tia, your turn.
No, I think this list is great. I think it's well balanced, and I know the bond may have higher priorities in certain things, but it also lists, lower priorities, and we don't want to ignore those. So I think this list, based on, how spread out it is throughout our district, and how what patrons it's affecting, and in terms of accessibility and equity, and it just follows our DEIA really, really well. So I'm pleased with the list. I'm hoping that Beaverton gets on board with us, because I feel like we are kind of the experts in this kind of stuff. So if there's anything that we can do, or if there's anybody we need to talk to, or any kind of letter that we need to sign, please send it our way, and task us to do something to help increase our partnership with Beaverton, because I feel like we would be the experts to kind of navigate their funds for their and our community members who live within the district of or within the city limits of Beaverton. But I'm 100% happy with this list.
Yeah, and I want to be really clear too with Beaverton. There's been no indication. I appreciate the support, and we will definitely take advantage of that. There's been no indication that we won't have a collaborative process here. It's really been on our side. We've just been derailed over the last month. We have not had a chance to reach out to them. But with this presentation tonight, I think it's a good motivation to now engage and see if we can get this going with them.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes, you have an enthusiastic board who definitely wants to see these dollars spent in our district. I can't see hands raised, and I can't read body language. So Wendy, I want to make sure that if there's something, anything else you want to add, that you have that opportunity.
Thank you. I do not there's always longer lists and more things that should go on the list than we'll ever get there. So I did not mean to come across as denigrating anything on the list. I'm hoping that, and I think staff has probably already done this, but since we all don't get to see each other very often, I'm hoping that, and again, I don't mean to pick on the sports court, because I really like the idea of the sports court, but I'm hoping that there is maybe other funding that we can get for it, where we don't have to use the Metro bond for it, or at least maybe a match. Mm-hmm. So those were the kinds of things that I was looking at, and I have no problem with accessible play structures. I do hope there'll be nature play, because that's what this kind of is about. So I mean, I didn't want to come across as, oh, I hate these things on this list. I don't.
No, Wendy, no one thought that. I apologize if you think.
Okay, good. No. I just want to make sure, because I do. I think they're all very, very valuable, and we have 14 more things we could put on the list, I'm sure, that are just as nice. Mm-hmm. But no, I do support going ahead with the list. I absolutely agree that as soon as we can do this and encourage Metro to move ahead, we should do that. I certainly agree also that I hope the city of Beaverton will come along with us. If they don't, for whatever reason, and I'm sure that, nothing would be nefarious, but for example, if I look at the map, if Greenway Park and the loop trails in the Greenway Park area go away, there's nothing in that portion of the district. So I'm a little concerned about balance for the geographic areas as well. But I know staff is looking at those things, and so I'm just adding my 2 cents worth. But I very much appreciate the work that's gone into this. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug and Keith, my hope is that gives you enough direction, that you have 5 enthusiastic board members about this, and you have, and I don't think anything Wendy's saying is in terrible opposition to our values. It's finding that balance of figuring out how to spend the dollars that we do have, and we're lucky enough to get so much as a direct result of the size of our district. So, Doug and Keith, do you have what you need to move forward?
I think we do. Thank you for the support on this.
Thank you.
With that, we are just about wrapped up on our agenda. Anything to add, Doug? Anything I forgot?
No, I think we're looking good. We appreciate the board's tolerance doing this virtually. I think we've been successful. It'll be interesting to see what the viewership is. We did encourage, just so the board's aware, we encouraged our staff last Thursday to listen in and watch. the best they can, obviously the PowerPoints and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see what the viewership is off of the YouTube. So we'll go from there.
Wonderful. Staff,
Felicita,
Yeah.
may I? It's
Yep.
Heidi. Is it worthwhile for us to also mention that next week we have our first budget meeting, and that is a public meeting as well that will be streamed via YouTube, if I'm not mistaken?
Correct. I think Jessica can clarify, but I think it's the same format, and obviously going to be a larger group. It's going to be interesting.
But I don't have to chair that meeting, so we're good. Thank you so much to my peers, to my staff, to our staff. God, thank you everybody for your resilience and your creativity in these unprecedented times. Thank you for making sure this meeting went very, very smoothly, Clint and Jessica, and everyone else. And with that, we will adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.